tracking developing news in Hartford, where the announcement was made a short time ago about reward money being offered in a number of cold cases. Here's Hartford Police Lieutenant Aaron Boisford.
I'm here today with Charmise Wolcott, the Hartford State's Attorney's Office, also members of the Office of the Chief State's Attorney's Cold Case Unit, and other members of GA-14 to announce the availability of reward funding for information leading to the resolution of 10 unresolved homicide investigations that occurred in the city of Hartford. Although these cases remain unsolved, investigators continue to actively pursue leads and are committed to bringing justice to the victims, their families, and to the Hartford community. Each of the 10 homicide investigations selected for this initiative was carefully reviewed by law enforcement officials and prosecutors. These cases were chosen based on the belief that eyewitnesses were present at the time of the incident, or that individuals with direct knowledge of the crimes have not yet come forward or shared all the information they possess. State's Attorney Charmise Wolcott submitted the selected cases to the Governor's Office for consideration under the State of Connecticut's Witness Reward Program. Following that review, the Governor's Office approved reward funding of $25,000 for each individual homicide investigation. The purpose of this initiative is to encourage witnesses and members of the public who may have information, regardless of how significant or insignificant they believe it to be, to come forward and assist investigators. In many cold case investigations, even a single piece of information can provide critical leads, corroborate existing evidence, or help identify those responsible. Investigators recognize that circumstances change over time. Individuals who may have been reluctant or unwilling to speak with law enforcement in the past may now be in a position to provide valuable information. The Hartford Police Department, the Hartford State's Attorney's Office, and the Office of the Chief State's Attorney Cold Case Unit remain committed to working collaboratively to solve these cases and hold those who are responsible accountable. Through continued investigative efforts, the assistance of the community, law enforcement hopes to provide long-awaited answers and justice for the victims and their loved ones. A reward of $25,000 is available in each of the 10 designated homicide investigations. Any reward authorized under this program will be paid only after information provided results in the arrest and conviction of the individual or individuals responsible for the homicide in the applicable case. Anyone with information is encouraged to contact the Hartford Police Department or submit information through appropriate investigative channels. I'm going to read the rewards. The first one is victim Jeremy Williams, date of birth 3/7/84. He was murdered at 117 Pembroke Street on February 17th, 2010. Devon Mitchell, date of birth 7/2/1990, murdered in the area of 671 Blue Hills Avenue on August 1st, 2015. The double homicide of Kevin Campbell, date of birth 4/4/1984, and Joshua Steele on May 3rd, 1990, who were murdered in the area of 273 Hillside Avenue on September 2, 2018. Alex Colon, date of birth 9/14/1994, who was murdered in the area of 782 New Britain Avenue on December 12, 2024. Elvin Rivera, 10/26/79, was murdered on Elliott Street on May 28, 2023. Jasmine Lewis, 5/16/1995, was murdered at 286 Homestead Avenue on May 23, 2021. Marion Edwards, date of birth 9/26/1998, who was murdered in the area of 295 Barber Street on July 18, 2023. Jordan Luna, date of birth 11/28/2007, who was murdered in the area of 17 Nelton Way on October 9, 2023. Terrence Brown, date of birth 12/23/1982, who was murdered at Albany Avenue at Burton Street on August 3, 2024. And Anthony Swaby, 4/8/94, who was murdered in the area of Blue Hills Avenue at Holcomb Street on March 4, 2020. It is important to note that while these specific cases are highlighted today, no cold case is ever closed. These cases are not forgotten and continue to be worked by members of the Hartford Police Department as well as the cold case unit. Many of these cases are a single witness or a piece of information away from being solved. We're going to be posting all these victims and the cases in more detail on our social media, so please visit that to get a more detailed description of the event. The Hartford Police tip line We could be reached at 860-722-TIPS. Once again, that's 860-722-TIPS. The cold case tip line can be reached at 866-623-8058. That's 866-623-8058.